Tak, dobrý večer, můžeme začít pomalu. Jsme všichni? Tak, já bych možná hned na začátku změnil jazyk do angličtiny, protože tahle ta akce byla plánovaná jako English friendly. So, my name is Wojciech Lekeš and I'm from Next Institute, and together with IPR Prague, we are organizing this event. And the main topic we're going to talk about, you can see here above me, and it's the adaptation to climate change in cities. And this is particularly urgent topic as we have experienced this year's summer, which actually brought so many extremes. And that this topic is actually demanded was also proven by you guys, that you took the tickets in like 4 hours or something. It just disappeared. So we're very happy that we have a big crowd, that we can talk to you, and that we have our international guests. So basically today we have asked our guests and the topics specifically in the needs for the Czech context. Because we are working with IPR, we are well aware of what challenges we have, but we are sometimes not really sure how to overcome them. And we know that our friends from abroad, they have experiences with these topics. So basically, they are here to help us with this. It's not just some other talk about sustainability, but this is very specific. So we hope that this conference can have a real impact. And we are meeting today, we have a public lecture, and tomorrow we have a meeting for experts, and we have lectures and workshops. So we're actually going to try to uncover the key points with the Czech experts working together, hand in hand. I would like to talk a little bit more about our organization, what we do. We're doing applied research in architecture and urbanism, and we're working a lot with the adaptation to climate change, and this is what brought us together with the IPR. We're originally from Brno, and we know that the city has a strategy how to adapt to climate change. Many cities in Czech actually do. The major ones, Prague, Ostrava, Brno, they are all covered, and even the smaller ones. What we don't know is how to implement the strategies, where to start, how to do the first steps, how to do pilot projects. So we thought that it could be cool to try something really quick, like a brainstorm on the model. So we made this installation. It was there for the autumn, and the goal was to trying to collect data and see how this is working. And this is a preliminary guess. We're still working on the data, but what we can say is that we have a real trouble with the extremes. The blue line is actually the rainwater, and the red line is temperature. And you can see the combination of high temperature and no precipitations, no rain, is actually really problematic. In order to keep our urban greenery healthy, we need to put there a little bit of technology. And that was our goal, to find out these loopholes and actually how we can assist to the urban greenery with a little bit of technology. You're going to see more of our work through our Facebook and web page. We're going to publish the findings of this project. But basically, this is exactly what we want to talk about at this conference, the implementation, to do real projects and to do pilot projects. So I would come back to the first slide and actually ask the first speaker to give us a little bit of introduction to the Prague context. And it's head of the Green Infrastructure Department at IPR, Mr. Jan Richtr.
Dobrý večer. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, dear guests. I'm very happy that we can present you with our guests tonight, these three really interesting presentations on really interesting topics. And I'd like to start with a more wider, broader introduction into the topic and why we are all here tonight. Okay. Můžu poprosit o prezentaci? So, as you all know, last decade, or maybe a couple of decades, not just we here in Europe, in the Central Europe, but all over the world, we are experiencing the climate change. The last few years, we are not only reading about climate change in news, in scientific articles, but we are actually experiencing in our real lives. This summer was a proof of that, and we, much more than before, have to solve how our cities will adapt to this changing situation. As you know, most of the population today, not just in the Czech Republic, in Europe, but also globally, lives in the cities. And cities will be the place where our future will happen. From the dawn of the civilization, from the Middle East, where the cities starts, until today, where the megacities, the megalopolis, is the center of trade, economy, and also our culture. The cities where are and will be where basically most of the things will happen. So the cities are our future, not just in Europe, but also worldwide. And we have to know, we have to learn how to make them livable and how to stay cool and dry in the cities. The future can look like this in 20, 30, maybe 50 years from now. It can be vibrant, green, livable cities where we are going to live. Or it will be flooded with heat and drought. What will become, it depends only on us. So what are the solutions? What can we do? On this question, I think, at least partly, we would like to provide you the answers. Not only technical solutions will solve the problems we have to face in the future. We also have to employ nature, we have to work with the nature, and also we have to learn how nature can work for us. So this is also what we are going to hear and learn tonight. Prague has started to develop basic planning documents, strategies such as strategic plan or adaptation strategy, and its first implementation programs and plans. We also have a strategy and manual for public spaces, and we are learning how to adapt our city. But what we lack are experiences, know-how, and long-term knowledge how we actually can make the difference, how we can make the real change, the real projects, and to really start adapting and making our city more resilient. We also are part of some European projects, and this is why we are here tonight, to hear what we can do and how we can change our city, how we can adapt, and how we can employ the nature for our benefit. So thank you, our guests, and thank you for listening, and enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Okay, so we're getting to our first international speaker, and as I mentioned, and as my colleague mentioned now in the presentation, we have three topics. We have basically the city's strategy and how to implement them into a pilot project. This will be more focused on the rainwater harvesting. We have a second topic, which is planting the trees in the urban environment, which is very, very challenging these days. And the third topic, and the last one, is how we can transform actually the regulation and how it affects the private sector. We have a great landscape designer who's got a lot of experiences from actually creating and drawing and creating the greenery in the cities. Our first speaker is originally from Denmark. He currently works in Edinburgh in Scotland, and he's a former director of a project called Klimatu. If you've heard of it, this is one of the best pilots worldwide, and is actually following the strategy which is called Copenhagen Climate Action Plan. Right? Please welcome René Sommer Lindsay.
Thank you. Well, thanks so much for inviting me, and well, I'll speak a bit about Copenhagen. Yeah, like Wojciech said, I worked with the city of Copenhagen for almost 10 years in different roles, and most recently as an advisor on the citywide adaptation plan, and before that as the director of the project Klimatu, where we did the first kind of adaptation solutions. So I'll be speaking about paths to adaptation, and I'm going to structure it around 4 themes, speaking about urban leadership in a wider context, and then about how we got to implementation and achieving the, well, further support to implement the full plan. So Copenhagen is, in urban planning circles, at least, a well-known city. We have Jan Gehl. We have a very ambitious climate action plan to be carbon neutral by 2025. We pride ourselves at being the best cycle capital in the world, even better than Utrecht or Amsterdam, whatever you might think. And like, it's well known as a rich, well-off city, usually one of the best places to live in the world by all these standards. Lonely Planet said it's the best place to go also next year, so come visit, although I'm in Edinburgh at the moment, but I'll be back. But of course there are also issues. Some of the main issues in Copenhagen is that it's a very expensive city, so we are experiencing a degree of urban inequality. It's difficult to find affordable housing, and we do have areas of the city that, well, become a bit run down and overlooked. We also have strategies to deal with these cities, and that's actually where I started. So I started working with urban regeneration, and this area is called St. Kjeld's Kvarter, and it's where, it's kind of the outer part of the inner city. It's an area of around 24,000 people, 10,000 workplaces, and it's an area that was overlooked and just kind of forgotten by the city government. So there hadn't been investments in the area for, let's say, 50 years before we came there. And we actually came there with just the goal of improving the urban quality, improving social and cultural life in the area. But literally a month after we moved into our office, a great flood hit Copenhagen. All of Copenhagen was flooded, cost almost €1 million in damages, almost took out the electricity to the central hospital. And this, the main street out of Copenhagen to the rich north part, was closed off for 2 days. And of course, it was an issue, and it popped up on the political agenda very much. So for us, it became a unique opportunity, and it became an opportunity to use rainwater management as a platform to change the area that we were working in. So the city council in a wider context had already been working on a climate adaptation plan and started working on an implementation plan, basically building up a business case. Did some very thorough analysis of risks and opportunities, did a case for what level we wanted to secure the city to, and an adaptation implementation plan was decided. It took some years, but at the moment the politicians of Copenhagen have actually said that within the next 20 years we're going to spend €1.5 billion implementing around 300 projects around the city to handle rainwater. So there's been made an analysis of rainwater flows in all of the city in 7 different catchments, looking at natural rainwater flow and how we can steer the water out of the places where it does damage and into the sea or into big parks where it doesn't damage buildings or people. But of course, €1.5 billion plan is not something that you build overnight, and we needed to get experience with how to actually apply it. And that's where we had the opportunity to become the Klimatu. So to begin with, I was the head of områdefornyelsen St. Kjeld's Kvarter, and this was a local regeneration project, but we partnered up with the wider city's climate and climate adaptation plans, with the local Agenda 21 Center, with the utility company HOFOR, with the Ministry of Housing and Development. And what basically we did is that we started to speak together and combine our budgets and combine our stories and essentially combine the narrative of where we were going. And by getting shared goals and shared interests, we could create the concept of Klimakvarter. So Klimakvarter doesn't actually exist. It's just a website that collects a number of ongoing projects that different actors were doing. But it became very impactful in that form. Together we developed a vision plan for the area, developed by the studio Tredje Natur, involving changes to streets, to squares, and to inner courtyards. And we started to show people in the area how the area could look in the future, how they could reimagine the area. So involving the community was our next plan. The area, as I said, is, I'm not going to say socially deprived, because that would be saying too much. Denmark is quite a rich country, but it's the poorer part of Copenhagen. There are certain buildings that have very high levels of social deprivations. We also have another corner of the area where the Prime Minister used to live. So it's a mixed area, and what was really kind of obvious to us when we were there was that people weren't connected. They weren't speaking to each other. They weren't really interested in each other. But Klimakvarter became a way for us to make it into one coherent neighborhood and to make the people speak to each other. We wanted to create a model for climate adaptation that could be used in the rest of the city. So we needed to speak about the area as a generic urban form, and it is this classical Copenhagen, or really kind of a continental European urban form. 5 or 6 story houses, around 33% of the area is rooftop, 33% is street, a quarter of the area are these inner courtyards, and less than 10% are green spaces. And what we wanted to find out is, in the future, when it rains, what do we do? And Tredje Natur, they actually won this early competition by proposing this very simple tactic, looking at the streets, concluding that we didn't have a lot of traffic, we did have a lot of parked cars, but it was actually possible to cut away 1/5 of the street width to liberate 50,000 square meters of asphalt and turn it into green space. That would, of course, make the area more beautiful, but also give us a place to handle on the rainwater. And this is the amount of rainwater that falls within the area in 2 hours on what we call an everyday rain. So essentially, this is the capacity of the sewer system today. If any of you are hydrologists or hydraulic engineers, I should be speaking about flow and Q values, but that's not important. It's a pedagogical approach to speaking about water with the people in the area. So this is the amount of water we could handle. This is the projections of everyday rain in the future. And this is the amount of water that falls in what we call a 100-year rain. So the extreme event that we had in 2011 was a 400-year event and was actually even more than this. But again, the business case in Copenhagen is to say, if we can make sure the city can handle this amount of rain, we'll be doing all right. So it's a technical approach combined with a soft landscape engineering approach. The technical approach is that we were close to the harbor, which is out here, and we needed to find the central lines to get the water out there. The blue lines, essentially. But what we wanted to do is also provide improvements to the area. Oh, yeah. So we also did a mapping of, spatial potentials of areas such as Tåsingplads, St. Kjeldplads, that had a lot of space, a lot of excess space, and a lot of opportunity, and we mapped out where we could improve it. And this became a layer on top of the technical infrastructure, saying that if we provide green infrastructure for handling rainwater, for everyday rain associations, we can also bring benefits to the area when it's not raining. And that's the strategy behind Klimakvarter. So this became a way for us to speak with people in the area and to get them involved in our project, to help them, to let them help us understand the potentials in the area and how we could benefit them with the project. Our next step was to support the first movers and to help people get into the understanding of what we were doing. And Tåsingplads is a good example of this work. We had an area with a lot of excess asphalt, open streets. In terms of traffic, it was a bit dangerous because you had two two-way streets meeting each other on top of each other. which from a traffic engineering point of view is very impractical, but also it was just not a very nice place to be. And we needed space to open up that we could use to handle rainwater. So the basic idea was to expand the green space all the way out here, basically dig a big hole and put water into it. And this was the idea that we presented to the area. And then we started speaking to them about how best to do it. So we held a lot of meetings with residents associations in the areas. We got their input. At this point, it was actually a private street, so we couldn't do anything without their approval. So I've gone to a lot of coffee meetings with these people to try to convince them that this was a good idea. Even though the municipality was bringing pretty much all the funding, we really needed to make them see that this was something that was necessary. Of course, it helped a lot that we just had a giant cloudburst and all their basements had been flooded. But still, it was very important to get their support and also to get their information and get their resources to help us make a better project. So we also went into the square. And this small square here, it was a small green spot before, but locally it was called Shit Island because it was mainly used for dog walking, or it was only used for dog walking. And because it was only used for dog walking, people were pretty much just leaving stuff behind. So we worked with a number of actually international artists who had a residency in this one building with the most social deprivation. So they got a flat on the 11th floor and lived there for 3 months and did projects in the area. And one of the projects was that they found Tosingplads. And this guy, David, he did a project called Instant Hygge. I don't know if you've heard of the Danish concept Hygge. Yeah, so Instant Hygge, free coffee. He went there every weekend for 3 months with a sign saying Instant Hygge, free coffee, and these kind of pull-up chairs, and asked people to sit down and speak to him about what the area was, and change the mind about what Tosingplads could be. And it also informed our project. We also did some larger scale projects. This is the former Ministry of the Environment, scything the area. We did some small festivals, a large festival, and just started to get people thinking about the potentials of this area in a new way. And all the input that we got from people using these, coming to our events, speaking about what type of planting they would like in the area, what type of activities, what type of urban furniture they wanted. That gave us input to the project that we could build in the future. And which was something that was quite unique for Copenhagen, was that the project was actually signed off by the 5 housing associations around it. So I was part of writing the design brief that the landscape architects did, but it was actually the residents who approved it. So the klimatu project became kind of a platform for us to collaborate with the community and to build a sense of community in the area. But it also became a platform for them to start speaking to the rest of the city and to reach out to politicians, speaking about all these ambitions we have for the city and speaking about why funding wasn't coming to that area. And it was quite useful. We were able to support other first movers such as Christian and Livia, who built, they saw this empty rooftop and they wanted to develop it. And what they did is simply building a farm, brilliant farm, brilliant atmosphere, and very soon this small farm became an attraction in the area. The farmhouse was turned into a restaurant, and it became an attraction that people from abroad would go to Noma, and they would go to this place to eat. So suddenly we had a destination, and this overlooked part of Copenhagen was something that people wanted to see. And it really changed the whole concept of the area. So climate adaptation for us became partly a technical solution to help, but very much about also changing the whole mentality in the area. Last, I just want to say that the municipality is actually still constructing out there. We're building a culture house that will be finished in 2020. We're building St. Kjeldsplads, which will be finished within a couple of months. And we're still supporting a lot of small-scale projects just to keep the atmosphere going. And that's been very important because, as this says, when the world is watching, a new sense of community appears, and it really means that we can help support the people in the area who understand the agenda and who help kind of push the agenda politically. And it means a lot because they own the story, but they also tell the story, and when politicians see something good happening, they want to fund it, and they want to promote it, and they want to help it. So we got a lot of credibility by doing this project and delivering it very fast. As I said, I don't know how it is here in the Czech Republic, but we presented the first idea in 2012, and we had a finished project in December 2014. And by Danish standards, that's like Usain Bolt fast. But it was really good, because people liked it, and they saw that we meant it seriously, something was happening. It gave a lot of good press. It gave a lot of further funding for the projects. So these two pictures I just love to take out, because they're pictures that we haven't taken. It's actually pictures we've taken from Instagram and from Facebook of local residents who've hashtagged it with klimakvarter, using the concept that, well, we developed for the area, but kind of using it at their own. And of course, we like to push the local people. So Gry is one of the residents around Tåsinge Place who helped me in writing the brief. And whenever people came to see, this is from Sweden, international press coming to the area, we would of course let the local people represent what was going on and let them have part of the fame. So this is just a map of all the projects going on. We have a website that also shows it and shows some more information. And I'm of course happy to answer further questions if you have, but later, and for now, we'll hear more from Sweden.
Really good, thank you. Thank you. All right, thank you, René, for a great presentation. Yeah, I forgot to mention this. We're going to have a panel discussion afterwards, after all the presentations, so please hold your questions. Our second speaker is from Sweden, from Stockholm. And what is particularly interesting, besides that he has years of experience and is attending a lot of conferences and trying to spread the knowledge from Sweden, is that he's working with greenery, but he's officially employed at the traffic department. That is specifically something we could use in Czech Republic. And I would like to introduce you, Mr. Björn Embren from Stockholm.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me, and nice to see so many people that's interested in this topic. It's kind of mind-blowing, this, what I'm going to tell you about, and it's hard for the brain to take it. So it's going to take a couple of years for you to melt it down, to make it practical. But this is what it is about, is porosity. If you can make the ground, get a good porosity in the ground, and you can infiltrate stormwater, you can solve a lot of problems with urban greenery. And that's the basic thing. If you want to have greenery in the city, you have to have oxygen in the ground. And you must find a way to, a solution to that. So I started at the traffic department in 2001, and I already knew, because I have worked with the greenery in Stockholm for 20 years before that, and I knew about the problem, and the big thing was that I saw was that a lot of trees in Stockholm were declining, and they behaved really bad. And I made an investigation from the beginning when I started, and I realized that up to 1/3 of the tree in the central part of the city was dying. So I immediately started to search for solution to get trees to survive better in the city. And after travel to the University of Hanover, I got some ideas for their research work they have done for 10 years in Hanover. And I came back to Stockholm and produced this drawing and tried to convince the civil engineers at the traffic department that this was the best solution, to put soil in the ground together with big stones. And you do understand that it was not happy faces that I met when I tried to convince them of this building roads and sidewalks in this way. But after a while, I found out that when they built streets in Stockholm 100 years ago, there was a way of building streets. They used big stones that they put on top of each other. and block roads. They call it block roads. And when I found a excavation in the central part of Stockholm, I found this construction. I told the traffic engineers that this is the way I want to build for the trees. Because the most important thing is to find a good, strong construction, and in the same time get a lot of porosity in it. And if you use stones like this in a single-size stones, you can get up to 40% of porosity in this kind of stones. We call it macadam in Sweden. And when I compared it with this way of building roads, they said that I could start testing it on sidewalks. And this was the first kind of drawing I presented for them, and how we want to solve the problem, because they didn't want to change anything of their upper, the surface layer that they had with the concrete slabs and the asphalt below that. So I couldn't touch that level at all. So I had to think out a way to build a planting bed for the trees below the surface, and this is the way it looks. We have this big kind of stones. It's 90 to 150 millimeter stones that we put out, and in 30 centimeters layers, and we compact it heavily. And then after the stones are put out, we flush down the material between the stones. In the beginning it was soil. And then we put the next layer of stone on top of the first layer, so they always get the support from the stones below, and compact it again. So this is the planting bed for the trees, where the root system should develop. And it's enough with the porosity in that material for the root system to develop. And on top of that, we put a clean layer of stones. It's the size of 32 to 63 millimeters, also almost single-sized, like a fist, and also compact that one. And that layer is for infiltration of stormwater and to get the gas exchange to work. And that's the really important thing, that these layers make the gas exchange to work. And the solution to get the gas from the ground was to put a well that we could take in the stormwater, and at the same time when the water goes in, it presses out the gases from the ground, and when the water goes away, it takes in oxygen from above. So this was a great success from the beginning. It was the first trees we planted in this solution started to grow immediately, and we have used it and built it in Stockholm in the same way since 2003 now. So we have around 15 years of experience of this kind of construction. And it really gives you opportunity to build something in old cities. It's easy to combine in quite narrow streets, and the sidewalks, you can still have the old kind of sidewalks, and if you do this kind of construction below ground. And what's the most important thing is this single-size kind of stones that we use all the time, and that give us the porosity of the material. And that's the most important thing to remember with our solution, that we always use this kind of material. And when we combine this with biochar, I don't know if someone knows about biochar here. Raise your hands. One, okay. This is a big issue in Stockholm. We have stopped using soil at the traffic department. We don't use soil anymore when we plant trees, perennials, shrubs, and things like that. We combine this stone material, as you saw before, together with biochar that can we can, instead of using a soil, manufactured soil, we use this kind of mixture of biochar that can hold. Biochar has this has possibility to keep water and nutrients, and it can clean water. It's act as a filter material. If you put stormwater in down to the ground and you have this material, it acts as a filter. So this is the way it works. We collect garden waste from the citizens of Stockholm, and they come and give it to us at the recycle centers, and we collect it and transform it in a biochar plant, with that where we make the biochar in a pyrolysis process, heating the organic material in oxygen-free heating, and then we get biochar from it, and then we use it when we plant the trees in Stockholm, and we also give it back to the citizens of Stockholm so that it can be a part of the climate, fighting the climate change, because they use the biochar, and at the same time, when they use it for their garden, they lock down the carbon dioxide in the ground. So with this idea, we won €1 million, so we could build this kind of biochar plant in Stockholm. And so now the citizens of Stockholm can go and left their garden waste, and they will give them back some biochar that they can use in the garden. Most of it I use for the trees in the Stockholm. So this is the basic mixture we use in Stockholm now instead of soil, and it's 6 parts of stone, 1 part of compost, and 1 part of biochar. And this gives it's a way of maximize the porosity in the ground, so the root system can develop extremely well, and they can develop in any direction they want. If you have this kind of mixture in the ground, you can use different sizes of stones depending on where you are. This is the smallest fraction, 2 to 6 millimeters, and that's what we use in open perennial borders, shrubs, plantation, or for trees when it's open ground. And if you have heavy traffic, you have this bigger size of stones that we use. And it can be quite hard to take that this is a good substrate for plants to live in, but this is what they really love this material. If you can't get a plant to grow it at home in your garden, when you use this mixture, I promise you, you will have success. So this is how it looks. Yeah, closer to me. You have to say it if you don't hear me. Okay, so this is the newest drawing we have of this solution that we try to really show it in a simple way how it works. And you can see the concrete slabs on top, and you have the well. We try to collect as much water as possible from the roofs and from the sidewalks and from the streets, and collect it and put it down to the structural soil, as we call it. And we separate the upper layer that the civil engineers want to have with a geotextile, and below the geotextile we have this 32 to 63 millimeters size of stones, and below that we have the bigger size of stones. This is for surfaces that have really heavy traffic on top of it, that we really have to have a strong construction. And we always have to try to connect as many planting pits as possible, because if the bigger areas you can connect to each other, the trees will have better opportunities to develop in a good way. And we try to put all the small cables and everything close to the building, and have our construction closer to the road. So this is how it looks like. We usually do excavation to 1 meter deep, and then we start to fill it up with this big size stones and compact it heavily. And the plastic material is just to protect the buildings and the cellars of the buildings, so we won't press the water to the cellar. And you see, the planting pits are connected all the way through the blocks, and these concrete boxes is to protect the surrounding construction from falling into the tree pits, and we plant the trees inside these concrete boxes. So this is how we compact the stones, and it's when we build it, it's important that the stones will fall into the openings, so you keep the construction in a good way. And it's no problem to have cables and pipes and everything in this kind of construction. It don't harm the tree roots in any way. But in the beginning, of course, the owners of the cables and the pipes are a bit afraid of what we're doing, but we are convinced, and so now it's no problem anymore to build it like this in Stockholm. So this is when we have a hose with water and flush down the mixture of biochar and compost between the stones. And this is when the voids between the stones are filled with the biochar and compost. And so this is 2 layers, and now the infiltration layer is coming on top of this one. And here's the infiltration layer and the wells that take in the water to let it out in this infiltration layer. And then we have the geotextile. And then you can do anything on top of this one. You have secured the porosity and the gas exchange and the water for the trees in this way of building for the trees. And then the next step is to find out the best way to collect water. Try to get as much water as possible. It's quite dry in Stockholm. We have 600 millimeters of rain water every year, so it's extremely dry. So in the beginning we just took water from the sidewalks, but now we take it from everywhere, from the streets, and wherever we can get it. And one thing that's good also, that we don't need to have any open covers around the trees anymore, because we have secured the porosity and the gas exchange and the water for the planting pits in another way. So this is how they develop. Even when we have had these 2 summers of extreme drought in Stockholm, extremely hot weather for a couple of months, they have established extremely well the trees. And of course, if you had old trees, we just take away and if they're in a good enough condition, we try to take away all the old material that is bad for the trees, and to put our own structural soil instead around the tree roots. And this is how it looks when we have done this work on old trees, and we start to construct, build a structural soil around the trees. And a good thing about it is that the mycorrhizae also love this kind of solution, because it's so much oxygen in the ground, it's a high humidity in the ground. So after just 1 year, you can find a lot of mycorrhizae in the ground, and that will also support the trees and make them develop in a good way. So this is one of the pictures that's really made it for me in Stockholm, when I tried to convince the bosses and the politicians that this is a good way of handling trees in Stockholm, because this is how it looked like after a couple of years. This is when we did the renovation of the old tree, and it's easy to understand the benefits of a tree that looks like the one on the right side compared to how it looked before. It's no environmental benefits from that tree, but from this tree you get a lot of benefits. So this is one of the first streets we made, Erik Dahlbergs Allé, and they still are growing extremely fast, even after 14 years, and it's easy to understand if you get trees to grow in this condition and so fast. You can see on the shots of the trees, it's at least 50 centimeters from the first growing season, and they haven't stopped yet. And you can compare with the old trees that are standing on the streets and with the new trees. We do use salt in the winter for 6 months, and with this open material, it's no problem with the salt on the sidewalks. The tree root system can cope with it when you have these open materials. Yeah, it's just to show you some nice pictures of what's happened with the trees when you give them something to develop their root system in. And of course, in the beginning, it was just to save the trees, but it has been more and more. The most important thing is to take care of the stormwater locally, and so this is the solution that Stockholm proposed to solve the problems in the city for the 20-year rain. It will cope with that, and it's enough to work with. So this is what we work with in Stockholm all the time now. Different kind of size of stones depending on the loads on the top of on the construction. The smaller size when there's no load at all, and the middle size when there's middle size load on the tops. So we we use this biochar when it's in a clean biochar as a filter in the bottom of the construction, and then we put the stone with a mixture of biochar and compost on top of that, and then we plant the trees on them. This is magnolia trees, and they love this construction and flowers extremely well in Stockholm. And this is some of the latest project we have done, just in the outside the central part of the cities. And you see this mixture of stone and biochar and compost, and it's extremely open material. So when it rains, the rain will immediately go into the ground. Nothing will stop it from going through this surface, compared with the grass surface that was before. And so same thing, try to collect as much water as possible to infiltrate in this material. And this is how it looks, the second year to this year, an extremely dry season that we had, and we still get this extremely well establishment in a year like this. And what's happened, one of the clues in this solution is that there is no limit for the root system to develop. They can go in any direction they want, and that's why they get so resistant to when it's dry weather. So this is a example of a more than 100-year-old alley that we renovate. And the same thing, we take away all the old material. You couldn't even call it soil before, but we take away and change it to this mixture of stone and compost and biochar. And it's nice because you can compact it and it really gets a good, strong construction. And you can't destroy the porosity of the material. But it looks a bit strange when you see the construction, and that this is really something for plants to live in. So this is the the middle size, 32 to 63 millimeter stones, and then on top of that we put a smaller fraction, so we don't have the surface layer to fall down in a bigger fraction of stones. And then on top of we have the smallest size of this mixture of macadam stones and compost and biochar, and then we put grass on top of it and get these results. So it's quite astonishing to see that this mixture containing recycled materials from the green waste of Stockholm can work in this way. Time, I don't know. Someone has the time? Something like that, almost there. So this is the mixture, the standard mixture. 3 parts of stone, 1 part of biochar that we started with. And this is perennial border with this mixture. This was before we started to use compost, and we get even more better results when we start to mix it with compost. 2 magnolias and perennials. So you get all these benefits. You reduce the risk of flooding because you give every trees use the stormwater. Every tree has 1 well and they can take the stormwater. And when the trees are developing so good, they can also reduce the presence of particles and carbon dioxide in the air. And just the reduce of the load of stormwater system and the pollution that otherwise would come to the lakes of Mälar and the Baltic Sea. So, and at the same time you lock down carbon dioxide when you use biochar in the mixture with the stones. So it's easy to see the benefits of using this solution for trees in the city. And we have this handbook that we have worked out. So far it's in Swedish, but we will come in English in a year, within a year, I would say. It will come in Swedish, but in English, and now it's in Swedish. But you can look at it and see the drawings and everything in this one. And of course, I've taken away the soil at home in my vegetable garden, and I have used this mix of stones and biochar and compost instead. So last year I got my first potatoes in this mixture, and this year I got my first carrots. So it's really an urban solution for everything. You can use it in any way, and it's surprising how well it works. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Björn. Thank you very much. So what we've seen and heard in first 2 lectures was actually the approach from the city. Now we would like to hear how is it from the private sector and how one can work with the regulations and what you can do. We have our next speaker from Stockholm. He's a founder of this really cool landscape studio called Urbio. Make sure to check it out. It's Mr. Mattias Gustafsson.
Hi everyone, I'm Mattias Gustafsson and run a small office in Stockholm called Urbio. We are about 12, 15 landscape architects right now. A lot of staff members are at home with kids, unfortunately. That's how it goes when people are young and, you know. I want to talk about what we call a red, green, blue cityscape. and the background is, of course, what is going on, which concerns me a lot right now. I have 2 daughters, and I think what will actually happen to them when I'm gone, and the world is, taking uncertain ways. And you've probably seen this before. It's all these hockey stick diagrams on what the civilization is doing with our globe right now. I found this picture at my kid's school. Some kid had drawn this, and I really don't want our kids to draw pictures like this. red, green, and blue. It's about creating more nature into our cities, nature and water. But what we as landscape architects are really interested in is to not only invite nature into the city, but also invite the people in the city to meet up with the nature of the city. We talk a lot about the urban ecosystem services in Stockholm right now. It's the municipalities are really eager to, discover how to use this this thing, and you also probably know of the global goals of the United Nations now, which is really something to look into if you haven't seen it. And this nature that is being added into the city, it can be so many things. That's what really interests me a lot. It can be not only the rain, it could not only be the vegetation, it's about the skies and everything. From the wildest type of nature into the nature that are really domesticized by us as people. How to grow vegetables, and when we organize nature very in a German way. Sorry. So I want to show you some of our ideas and also some of the projects that are going on the office right now. And as René showed us, we have to look at the city from a broad perspective. We have to look into the streetscapes, of course, with the trees, and of course the squares. How can these be multifunctional? And me as a landscape architect, we also work very lot on the private part of the city, the plots. And there we have the courtyards and the roofscapes. And then, of course, we have the bigger parks of the city. And we can do so many things more than we do right now with the parks, I think. It's a huge opportunity there. So first, I want to show you some of our idea projects. This is, you know it, it's Vasagatan. It's when you come to Stockholm, you probably start here because it's next to the train station. It's where all the trains come and the buses from the airport. But it's a shitty place, sorry. It's loads of traffic and lots of hotels. So people that come here, they probably end up here in a hotel. But what if we create sunken social activities and that are actually used as basins for rain? Here's another, the most poisonous area in Stockholm before Björn started to plant lots of ginkgo trees there now. This idea project was made a couple of years ago. But what if we collect the water and take the water through pergola structures that are put in some of the traffic lanes, and the cars can go there, but not as many as before. And the shops and everything can start to use these spaces that are created by the pergolas. And on the pergolas, we have climbing plants that go up. It would create a totally different streetscape than is there now. We have this, Björn is really good with planting a lot of different exotic trees, but what if we look upon the city as a huge arboretum, a tree collection, and maybe if we put furniture next to every tree and put information about this tree there, so people can go there, look at what the tree is, how does it work for us, all the benefits. And so this furniture was kind of designed so you would sit there, but you would start to slip, you know, and maybe you go and you see, suddenly you see the tree. This was another idea project really early when I started office in 2010 with rain gardens on Sveavägen. And Sveavägen was supposed to collect the castle grounds with the summer castle in the north of Stockholm in this huge long road. But it would never connecting because we put a cultural house in the middle of the way in the 70s. But we call this blue band, and it's kind of because the royalties, they use the you know, the blue thing, the royal blood thing, but here it's for water. So that was kind of a symbolic thing of this parade street. Now I will talk about Stockholm Royal Seaport and a small quarter there. It's just a piece of the puzzle of the city fabric. But when I started office in 2010, we were invited to start working with this plot. And it was actually the first time when Stockholm wanted to use the green area ratio or green index. It was the idea was taken from Malmö, that had used it 10 years before in the south of Sweden, and Malmö took it from Berlin 10 years before that. So you see, we are really in the outskirts of the civilization. Things are popping up years later in the north of Europe, except for tree pits, of course. This is the development. It's an old gas industry area that was abandoned. So it was a whoopee. What happened now? Help. So we started to, oh yeah, there we go. We started to work with this area in 2010. And these were some of the design concepts to make a border around it, to make connections, and to take in nature topologies, bringing into the courtyards. And this is how the green area ratio looks like. It's really ugly looking. It's an Excel sheet, and you put different areas on how, from the design, from gravel to trees to vertical greenery to roof greenery and everything. It's put there, and then you have to see you have to look into the factor if you succeed to beat to become over 1.6 in this case. And this was given to us from the municipality and the planning board. So I have to help my clients to succeed in this, and to show the city that we are really a green project. And this is because in Royal Seaport the amount of cars is 0.5 per apartment. So every second apartment could have their car stored underneath the quarter. And this is how it looked like in our drawings in 2010. And this is how it ended up in 2018. And we also designed these rain collectors. taking the roof, water from the roof, collecting it, and this is how it became. A little bit more dull, but it works. We also designed a tool for plant communities. We wanted low and a little bit higher in really shady or half shady spots. So these were 4 different typologies that were spread out throughout the quarter. And then we had like a recipe for each of these areas. And as the project changed throughout the process, the amount of different plants just followed it. So it was kind of easy for us. But then, of course, the entrepreneur came and said, I want to know exactly where every plant is being put. So we have to design that afterwards, so it looked like this. We also designed a furniture, because the Royal Seaport is between a nature reserve that is called Nationalstadsparken, with lots of old oaks. And south of the area is also a huge area with old oaks. It's supposed to be the North Europe biggest and area of old oaks. So doing this city development, if you put in oak trees into the quarter, your green area factor was going up. And if you put in dead wood, the green area factor also popped up a bit. So we designed this furniture for people to sit on or climb if you're a small kid. And underneath it, we put dead wood chips together with... we had a certain recipe because we talked to the biologists. So they should be dead wood chips from oaks, apples, and you know when you make porridge you have the oats. Yeah, thank you. And also, according to the biologist, there should be a dead bird, because all of this was about mimicking an old oak, you know, the hollow oak with the powder coming out. It's called mulm in Swedish. And a lot of different insects, especially bugs, are having their larvae in that, living there for years, and then they come out as a bug. And the entrepreneur told me I was sick in my brain. So you have to find a dead bird yourself. So I had to go to this really fancy store in the middle of the city center when I was going there by bike, because I passed by. So I bought a really small chicken. And now it's buried underneath this furniture. And here are some photos how it became. So people have moved in. It's really nice to go there, and people are kind of happy. We also put a meadow in the central part, and some parents are really worried because they are afraid their kids will have ticks. We're not too afraid of that, and some are really also worried about snakes. We told them there would be no snakes. Yeah, and the growth here has been amazingly. The climbing plants had reached the third story already the second summer. So that was one project. Here's another one. It's in the central part. The client asked us to do a really green project, but the problem was that the whole plot was a building, and the Stockholm Water Administration asked the municipality to have a really green project. So the municipality asked the client to make a really green client, and wow, we got the commission. And here it is, being built. It's a super block with the like cubes stacked on top of each other, and we'd made these roofscapes. And some of the areas are privately owned gardens, their own, and the central part is for the whole of the all the people living in this building, and the nice thing is that the orangery, what do you call it, the glass house, is over there. So when it starts to rain, you can move in, and when the sky is clear again, you can move out. So it's kind of a nice spot. And every time I went here, there are people up there having fika, coffee, and or studying, or chatting to each other. So it's a really nice spot with a great view. So here was the plan. And the thing is that half of the plot is a building, and half of it is on the ground, but with a 3-story garage for cars. And that was also very green, but really shady. Shady, not so noisy, not too much wind. If you go up on the roof, it's sun, lots of wind, and really noisy. So you can choose what you want. So this is some pictures from a drone. And here, we had to find the furniture that was really heavy because of the wind. It's a French furniture that was chosen. Yeah, some constructional drawings. We used a wood that is, they put, name of it. We don't want to use, this green wood that is impregnated with copper and stuff, because of the water quality, then becomes kind of poisonous. So this is a more eco-friendly wood, but with chisel. Yeah, they put chisel into it. Yeah, so they make it like a almost like a fossil wood, So my last project is now under construction. It's a park in the central of Stockholm, and the Stockholm municipality asked us to do a stormwater park out of this historical site. And when we got the commission, they had put like a huge ditch in the middle of the grass lawns, but we said no, we want to move that into the periphery of the park instead, so you can use the lawns even though the park is filled with water. And now we are doing the number 2 here is under construction, but it's 4 different parts. And this is some of the problem is that it's the lowest part of the whole area, and after heavy rain, the whole park is, some of the park is flooded, but the wrong part of the park where people want to go. So we said we take the water to the periphery instead. So this is the concept of it. And we're going from concept into the technical drawings. And we made this flat, hard surface area that not only can have water underneath, but also on top after really heavy rain. And here how it ends up after heavy rain. Some constructional drawings, and here it's under construction. Thank you for listening.
All right, so actually I would like to ask, first of all, thank you very much, Mattias, for the presentation. And now I would like to ask all the 4 gentlemen who were presenting for the panel discussion. So we are actually falling a little bit behind the schedule, but we were supposed to finish about now. But I'm sure we will give some time for the discussion. So if you have questions, just raise your hand and I will give you the mic, all right? Are we set? Okay, let's take the first one here.
Hello everyone, thank you for your presentations. I'm Vít Masaryk from the Czech Green Party. I'm dealing with the urban development for quite a few years already, and I'm glad you came to share your experience with us. And I've got one question on you and another one on people from IPR here. The one for our foreign guests is if you could share with us your experience with the, let's say, with the debate about the energy use in your respective cities, because one thing is the green infrastructure and the other thing is what is the energy that drives all the urban facilities around, whether this is a topic of debate in your cities or rather not. So that's my question for you. And the other one, logical, is to compare the current state of working with trees in the streetscape in Prague. If you could compare what we saw here from especially Stockholm and the current problems and challenges here.
I'm sorry if I could just jump into it, please, about the energy, because that's not really the topic of tonight's conference. So,
but I could say something
yes,
about
please,
it,
please,
because
but briefly. Yeah, I don't want to. I don't want to detour.
No, I just want to say that's one of the part of the when we transform the garden waste, we get and make the biochar. We get about 25% of excess heat, and that is used in the district heating system. So we get environmental friendly energy from our production of biochar. So that's one thing that could happen, and we didn't know that from the beginning.
Yeah, and after this heat wave this summer, I think there has been really some insight on the need of city trees now. So because of the cooling of the cityscape from the trees. So I think that, together with putting vegetation on top of the buildings, that we as landscape architects can help out the house architects with their problems. But I know in Stockholm there's regulations on how much energy the building should consume, and because we have this winter period, there is now less and less cold, and we start to have a demand for cooling. Yeah, so it's a shift because of the climate change, which is kind of scary.
And if I may, do to answer the second question. In Prague, we have problems and challenges with trees, especially because the soil is heavily compacted. There is a lack of oxygen. Basically, what Björn showed us solved this problem. And also, there is a conflict with technical infrastructure, with the networks. And we are just starting to develop a way how to communicate between the different organizations who take responsibility for the public spaces. And one of the pilot projects or projects that show that it can be solved is the project of public space in front of the National Museum that has been open this month, basically. And there we used the root cells that actually help to roots to have more lighter soil substrate and prevents the substrates from compacting with so you can have a sidewalk on top of it, and the roots still have light substrate, so water can be accessible and also oxygen. But as far as I know, we don't use this structural substrate here in Prague, and it's a really intriguing idea, and I really like it. And I would like to know what other landscape architects here thinks about, or engineers thinks about this technology.
Yeah, thank you very much. So another question, please.
Good evening. I'd like to ask you, how is it with the runoff water from the streets where car goes when it goes directly to the roots of the trees? How you treat that, and if it's okay? I'm not a landscape architect, so that's just like basic question. And then I had a different question. Oh, yeah, and how the your system is actually seems logically much better than the cells we are talking about in the National Museum. And how is it with the financial thing? Is it less expensive, or the same expensive, or more effective? Or if you can compare it a bit. Thank you very much.
It's much better. No, but it's just one thing is easy to understand. Is if you're going to do an excavation after 100 years, do you going to find these plastic cells there? But in my solution, you have the stones, and the stones is easy to recycle, and you can remake the planting pits in 100 or 200 years. And you can use local material, you can use recycled bricks, you can use recycled concrete. Just have always in mind that it's single-sized stones or single-sized material that you use all the time. So it's extremely environmental friendly way of building. And what was the first question? I forgot.
The first question was about the cargo.
You're afraid of the water. Okay, it's not a problem at all. We have one of the most polluted areas in Stockholm. It was an old shipyard that have been there for 300 or 400 years. So it was extremely polluted with lead and everything you can imagine. And still it was a green island. Completely green. So trees don't bother about some pollution that we think is dangerous. But if you have this open material and they can choose where they should put the root system and get hold of what they want, they don't bother about this kind of small pollution that you get from the streets. It's nothing compared to what we had in that old shipyard. And yeah, it's...
If I can maybe add to that, then I think trees and nature in general don't care so much about pollution, but regulatory authorities care a lot. So for Tosinplatz, we had to do all sorts of working around. We have a street also that collects rainwater, and we've actually made a closed-off Feskin system with filter soil that cleans the water quite well. The only thing it can clean off, it's salt, and we also use salt in the winter. So that separate Feskin system is actually connected to the blue system I showed. It ends up in the harbor. But as Björn said, it's not from it's not from a natural perspective. It would be completely fine for us to infiltrate the water, both for the plants and for the groundwater, because even in terms of salt, we would be desalinating because it's already salty. We're right next to the ocean. So it's purely regulatory requirements, which makes this very expensive. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah. One thing here, it's all over the world you can find the research about how soil works. A living soil works as a biological filter, and we just make it really extremely well. Good opportunities for microlife and the microrights and everything to work with the pollution that comes down, all the nutrients that come with the rainwater and everything like that. So, yeah.
All right.
That's how
Other
we
questions?
think.
Yes, from here. I will come back to you.
Hello, I'm Jana Pišková, landscape architect, and may I ask what is the difference between biochar and charcoal? It's because it's made of biological components with more nutritions and.
No, it's no. Really, it's no difference. But it's what it's made of. That it's recycled material, and that it don't contain any contaminations, and how it's made. That's why we call it biochar. It's an environmental friendly way of making charcoal, and you use recycled material. That's why we call it biochar. Otherwise, when I don't have any at home, I can go and buy charcoal instead and chop it in small pieces and use it for my flowers. So I use it for all my pot plants inside the house and outside everywhere. This mixture I showed you today.
Yep. Thank you. Next question here.
Thank you. Hi, I'm sorry. I have a follow-up question for Björn. Good evening, and I'm also a student of landscape architecture, and I would like to ask what's the lifetime of this biochar and soil and like gravel mixture? How long does it take for you to like wait for the tree to use up the nutrients? And
I think it's about 5,000 years. No, no, really, it is. We copy nature in this way. Because of this structure of the stones, that you don't break it in a couple of years. It's there, and the only thing that we put down between the stones is organic material, so you don't block the porosity in that way. So then the root system is living there and dying there and living there and dying there. So it always support this system all the time. So it's never-ending story, really.
Thank you very much.
Yes, another question.
Hello. One of you said you want to replace a lot of asphalt in your streets and replace it by greenery. How do you explain to people, how do you convince them this is necessary? Because at least in Prague, there is a lot of people who are complaining about these changes because they need parking spaces, they're worrying about traffic and so on. Thank you.
Well, of course, I can't say this counts for all of Copenhagen because of course, inner Copenhagen is also more pressed for space. We were in the fortunate situation that Tåsingplads that I showed had a lot of kind of obvious waste of space, and there were a number of areas out in this neighborhood that similarly just weren't optimized very well. So what we did, I didn't have time to show the illustrations, but we actually picked 3 or 4 different locations and just made visualizations of how this could be improved, and like from a very, actually like some of the early like idea sketches that Mattias showed, we printed them on giant posters and put them on the street and said, could you imagine this for the future? Join our conversation and be part of this discussion. So we showed some of the, well, most obvious bad examples of street design and how that could be improved to start that conversation. And what really helped very much is showing a project like Tåsingplads, which has been done without removing a single parking space. And I'm sad to say I had to say no to one tree, actually, because I promised the residents I wouldn't remove a single parking space. And that was the precise space of one tree. So there's one tree less than I would have liked. But it's been done just by optimizing the street, not by removing parking spaces. And another thing is that most residents, again, this is mainly a residential area. It's outside of the city center. So people live here. And if you tell them, we'll make your street more narrow and you will be driving slower and it's going to be safer for your children and it's going to be nicer to move out, they'll see it as something positive as long as you don't remove their parking spaces. So actually parking spaces was the only, we just said, we won't remove parking spaces, we'll just optimize the street. Then everybody was pretty much happy with it.
All right, we have time for a couple of last questions. So go ahead if you're still wondering about something. Yes.
Well, once again, thank you very much for your presentations. From a consultant's point of view, I'd like to ask all three of you, maybe four of you, let's keep progging game. Who were the enablers of your projects? Both, let's say, politically, not in the purest sense of the word, like who were the gatekeepers, and financially. So who were the enablers of your projects? Thank you.
You remember the picture of the almost dead tree and the green tree? That was the key for me. I gave it to my bosses and they used it in their presentation of what we're doing in Stockholm. And they were so proud of showing this for other cities, and it was so easy to show the benefits of it. And that's opened the money box for me.
Well, the large enabler for us was that we had a flooding, just at a time when the city was developing its thoughts on climate adaptation, and we got the first bit of money for doing the demonstration project. And we were very lucky with timing that Tåsinge Place was unveiled while Copenhagen was the European Green Capital in December, and it got a lot of media attention, made the politicians very happy. So to begin with, our project had, I'm not even sure in euros, I'll say it in crowns, just so you can see the proportion. We started with around 30 million crowns for this physical project, and we're ending up spending around 400 million in total. Of course, much larger scale than we originally planned, but yeah, just because there was a positive feedback by showing that you could do it in a positive way, benefits feeding back, growing up. And Luca Leonardsen helped a lot, who was the former leader of the adaptation plan. So like, there were also people in the system who showed leadership and said, this is. Yeah, so he was the political leader. Actually, not when at the very start. It was a woman named Aifa Baikal. So I'm going to say more. There were like some very strong officials and there's a culture of taking risks in Copenhagen that I'm surprised with. Now that I've moved out of it, how much it actually is there. I thought that was just the way to go. But Copenhagen is a great place to work because you actually get to move things forward. Partly because there's political backing, but also because the officials like believe in taking chances.
Yeah, in Stockholm, Stockholm has built this area called Hammarby Sjöstad that was really quarter or a part of the city district. And now they've taken on all the knowledge from there to the Royal Seaport. So I think the municipality has their own apartment doing almost all the city planning and the environmental thing, and creating this toolbox for green area ratio. So there's a demand for landscape architects coming in early in the process, making the projects much better now compared to 10 years ago because of these eco city districts, I think, where they put ambitious goals.
So your investors that come to you already prepared?
Yeah, because they seek new innovative solutions for landscape architecture, yeah.
And in case of Prague, I think the most interesting project in the recent time is the public space in front of the National Museum. And I would like to ask Rosa if she can answer who was the enabler, because she is in the team of the designers.
Well, it was the mayor. It was Miss Karnacheva in this case, that she pushed this project through, and in 1 year we managed to get from the idea of doing something to the implementation. Although there are, of course, some risks that were taken in this sense, and we can talk about it later. Can I have a different question? Yeah, I was also thinking about how your system works with when it's like extreme droughts and dry seasons, when there's actually no rain from the top. I don't know, for months, because as I see it in my head, that the capillary action is kind of stopped with your. It's kind of like a drainage system in this sense. So how it works when it's like in the neighborhoods or locations where there's no rain from above things.
Okay, that's the situation we had this year, and it works extremely well. And you saw the pictures when we have done the excavation. We have this 1 meter deep ditch, so you create a lot of surface areas in the ground, not just the volume of the stones and the mixture of stones and biochar and compost. That's one volume, but you also have a lot of surface in the bottom and in the sides. And when you have a whole block of this construction, the root system can travel together with mycorrhiza and find ways out down in cellars and things like that, perhaps, or below the house, or in the real ground material that is there. So you can see differences, of course, if you have clay in the ground, or if you have sand in the ground below our construction, you can see different things. And of course, if you're on solid rock, that's we also build on top of course they have a struggle in this summer, but if you have sand or clay, it's no problem. They survive because of the extremely well-developed root system. And one thing I didn't talk about is that the root system is finely divided. It's not this big pipeline root system that you see often in the city, because they're really searching for water and air and everything. But if you do this construction, you get a lot of finely root systems, so they're not so sensitive to excavation, because in the city, almost every 10 years, new pipelines or cables are put in the ground, so you always continuous excavation done in the city. So if you have this fine divided system, the trees will cope with it much better than earlier.
Okay, I'm sorry, I have to jump into this. We're running out of time a little bit, so maybe the very last question. I'm sorry, the lady back there. We don't have the throwing microphone.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I think for Prague will be very useful how to do it with trees in street, how to do with this water and so. But I have to say I'm a member of municipality of Prague 12. I was deputy mayor of Prague 12, and maybe I will be in because of election, and I will be too. And I have one not good situation in Prague. It is not so nice how it was said. It's very nice that we do space before national theater in this way. It is very nice. But other situation is that how we know the metropolitan plan wants to cut about 10% of greens of trees on green areas. For example, in Prague 12, metropolitan plan wants to I am sorry for my English. Můžu to říct, ano. Máme park v Praze 12, který metropolitní plán, který pan Koudský navrhl zastavět. Takže my na jedné straně se tady snažíme, a je to velice dobré, protože v centru jako je velice obtížné sázet ty stromy a já si myslím, že to, co jsme slyšeli tady, je jedna z cest, jak to prostě ty stromy tam dostat. Na druhou stranu teda musím říct jednoznačně a doufám, že to našim hostům přeložíte, že jsou tady snahy redukovat zeleň, because Prague is very green town. I don't know if they say you this critic. Green town and developers in our country wants to zastavět tuto plochu. Cut these trees and build new houses. And what is very bad, some architecture plan squares without trees. It is true. It is not in Prague, I hope, but in Příbram, for example. Otázka is what they say to this. That on one possibility is that we will grow these trees. On other side, and what they say that we cut trees. And for example, in our directive, we reduce. How much green areas have to be if you build something? What they say to it.
Thank you. We are actually going to cover this question tomorrow. There is not enough time today, but basically what you're saying, no, I mean this. Basically what you're saying that there has to be a compromise between greenery and urban space. We need to learn how to build compact cities because they bring certain urban qualities and we need spaces to build, but sometimes it goes into parks. We are covering parks with built environment, with buildings. So where is the compromise and how to do this effectively and having a functioning greenery and functioning city at the same time? So if one of you would like to address this, we're going to talk about this, about the green area ratio, especially with Mattias tomorrow. Where is actually the finest level and how can we motivate the landscape architects and the architects to bring quality greenery actually into our cities? We know that we have limited space, so we need quality, we need performance. That's why you've heard this system, ecosystem services. Sorry. Right.
Yeah,
if you could continue
it's a debate in Stockholm now.
Yeah.
If you use the green area ratio, can you take away the parks? And the answer is no. And in Royal Seaport, it's really compact, and they put many small pocket parks instead of a big park. But this area is next to the natural reserve, so therefore, if you want to find huge scale nature, you can go across a bridge and you're in this pasture landscape. So that's how they worked with the balance between the urban and the urban green in Royal Seaport, I think.
Yeah. If you would like to add anything to it, otherwise we slowly wrap up.
Can I just from the IPR? Well, the metropolitan plan, the one of the main ideas is that the Prague should become a compact city, and I think in general the idea is really economical and ecological in the same time. But what that means is that we have to learn how to build within the city, how to build with the green pockets, how to introduce nature into the compact city. I'm not sure if Prague today is 100%, if Prague knows, and the landscape architects, they know, but if we have the experience with the really high compact greenery in the city, like green roofs, green facades, for example, I think that that's one of the challenges for us here in Prague to really learn how to build, how to design and how to build really intensive green spaces within the compact city. And we should solve this problem with a much in detail projects and pilot projects that are in a scale of a neighborhood, of a city. I mean, neighborhood and the street, the scale of street and basically the scale of sidewalk and scale of tree line. That's where we have to find new ways how to introduce the natural functions and natural processes, as gentleman here showed us today. So city has many scales, and metropolitan plan answers on some couple of scales, but we have to also look for more in detail and look for techniques and approaches in this detail.
Yeah.
So.
Thank you very much. Our time is up, so we have to sum up for today. We're going to be here tomorrow. Unfortunately, you cannot be here tomorrow, but you will get all the informations we are going to be discussing with our experts, because we're writing everything down, we're going to publish it, and we're going to share it. So follow us, follow IPR, follow us as a Next Institute, and you're going to get the information. Thank you for coming, and one big applause for all the speakers today. Thank you.